welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, the long season. Still at 0.90 because upgrading to 1.0.2 is completely impractical. There's just been too many changes since then. In any way, getting ready to send the Babylon 1 station out to orbit around the moon to fulfill a contract and get it in position where I want it in the first place. After getting the maneuver set up, I start things going with the flight computer, and the station displays a most interesting trait. It spins. And it spins rather a lot when the flight computer is in charge. If the remote tech flight computer was in charge of things, then the station would spin, just like you see here. And there was no explaining it. I mean, it would maintain its heading. It would hold the maneuver node heading just fine. But it would continue to spin about its long axis wildly and rather quickly. It took me a long time to figure out what might be the cause of that, and I'll come back to that. Meanwhile, I get this thing set up into its orbit, coming around the moon, following that red example orbit there, and or the red orbit indicated by a contract. And I get this thing out there. And then, of course, with the usual messing about with maneuver nodes and such, I get the orbit plotted and in stages get this station lined up with the red orbit there presented by the contract. And slowly, gradually get it into position, dealing with the mysteriously spinning space station the whole way. As I was getting in position to execute this last burn that I was planning, I did run into one problem along the way, and that is, in spite of the fact that this ship has got a lot of batteries on it and an enormous number of solar panels, it ran out of electric charge about 3/4 of the way through the night side, through the trip around the night side of the moon. And I basically had to time warp and wait a little bit until it got back out in the sun and regained enough electric charge to do something. Once it had some charge, I was able to go ahead and complete the last 2 burns to get this thing into orbit, at which time the contract did complete and I got paid for it. However, then I noticed something. The red orbit was still there. Upon looking further at the contracts, I figured out that the contract for put a station in orbit around the moon did not specify a particular orbit. Any orbit would have been good enough. It would have saved me a lot of maneuvering time and a lot of hassle. The red orbit was for to place a satellite in a specific orbit around the moon. And that's what has to be done next. So I took some time and I did a little bit of searching, and I found a darkness time calculator that determines just exactly how long a vehicle in orbit around any given body in the Kerbal system is going to be in darkness, given its apoapsis of 259 kilometers and periapsis of 246 kilometers in orbit around the moon. That, combined with the fact that it uses 7.70 electric charge per second, it means that this thing will require 8,532 electric charge to be able to have enough charge to still be powered through the entire night side of the trip. And so, my first thought is to simply build another module with basically a lot of batteries, several batteries on it, and get it out here, dock it with this thing, and thereby give it the ability to get through the night. I also had some thought about why this thing spins like crazy when the remote tech flight computer is in control. And I think I figured it out. Each one of these sections, having been put up here separately, has its own probe core. And that wouldn't be a problem except for one thing. When docking these things together, I never bothered to even concern myself with which side of the probe core was up. Or more specifically, how the probe cores were aligned with each other. And the best way to show that is to go back to the vehicle assembly building. Okay, the way the problem works is basically the part of the probe core, and here's the Probodidyne Octo probe core that I've been using. And you see right here it's got a label on this one side that says Octo. That is what the probe core will consider as up. If you basically, when you've got this side up from the point of view of your camera, then that's when it's going to line up with what the nav ball is showing you and what your controls are doing, your translation and rotation controls are doing, and so on. But, say for example, I take another ship with an Octo probe core, I dock it to this one, but the difference is that this one is rotated. Say, for example, it's lined up like that instead. And we look around here, and for this one, the Octo label was over here. Now this one is going to consider this direction to be up, or the dorsal side, if you will. And so when the flight computer takes over, and it tries to roll the thing to a upside up orientation for navigation, the two probe cores are going to be both delivering a different report of what direction is up. And so the thing is going to first go to this one, and then this one's going to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not right side up. And so it's going to rotate for that. And for each section on the station, there is another probe core, and they're all pointed in different directions because I paid zero attention to that little factor of lining things up when docking it together. So, the first thing to do before sending anything else out there is to arrange it so that all sections of the station have the same direction referred to as up. Okay, so here we are back out at the station, and I propose to fix this problem with the remote tech flight computer being confused over the orientation of various components of the ship. I've got the flight computer disabled, and I'm going to leave it disabled for this procedure. And what I simply propose to do is to undock each section and then rotate it until everything is aligned correctly. And I can tell that by looking at the docking port alignment indicator. The orange indicator, the one that centers the long axis of each component that you're going to dock, also has an item out here on the edge that you can use to line it up so that both sides have the same up, as it were. And I know that in space and whatnot, up is not quite the same thing as it is anywhere else, but it serves as a reference point at least. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to this docking port. Okay, the Probodidyne Octo right there. Let's control from there, and then let's undock this docking port. Alright, now I'm controlling from the rearmost section, the camera side most section of the ship. So we'll turn on RCS and
back away. Let's turn off fine control so you can actually see the thruster action here. And I am noticing another somewhat significant problem. I have already chosen undock. So if I right click on this, I have set as target as an option. Right click on this one, I have a control from here option, which I don't want. I want to control from the octo probe. But I am thrusting away from the station as much as I can, and it is not separating. It is undocked, but it will not separate. So let's try switching to the station. And let's see. We'll do a control from here. And turn on RCS and back away. And again, it is not separating from the part that I just undocked from. And it is undocked, or otherwise it wouldn't say set as target. This represents something of a problem. This tells me that this ship is somehow bugged. And that means that I don't want to leave any crew on it. It just doesn't strike me as being a very good idea. So, Babylon 1 has a fatal flaw. And it appears to not be possible to undock. Let's try to undock from here. All right. Octoprobe, come on. Control from here. Docking port. Undock. RCS. Back away. And again, it is not undocking. Yeah. This is a problem. This is rather a big problem, I think. This means that the ship is somehow bugged. And if it currently will not... Currently, all the bug means is that you can't undock sections once you dock them. But I can see a bug that starts out small growing into a bug that will stomp on your whole project. So I think the thing to do now is to get a ship out here, get this crew off of the station without docking with it. Alright, here we are in the VAV with a ship that I have dubbed the Training Hopper. The purpose of this ship is to take a load of Kerbals to Minmus and land them there, where they can take surface samples and they can plant flags and so on and so forth. Not only gaining some science, but also gaining some experience, because experience is based on where you go and whether you planted a flag to prove you've been there, and so on and so forth. So this ship is going to head out to the moon. It is going to rendezvous with the space station. The crew of 4 Kerbals that are aboard it will EVA over and get into the hitchhiker can there, and then it will head to the moon. It will head to Minmus and so on. And what will happen there is that this ship will fulfill a contract because it has an antenna, it has power, it has a docking port, and it has the ability to support up to 5 Kerbals, because the hitchhiker can holds 4, the capsule holds a 5th one. So I'm going to make sure that nobody is trying to hitch a ride, and now adjourn to the launch pad. Okay, here we go. So we're just getting ready to go. And let's see, I'm going to make sure that this is off. And I'm just going to use Smart ASS to control things for this one. And let me make sure that I have an antenna set. ComSat 1, activate. Okay. So, let's get this thing on the way. So, the launch phase of this thing goes pretty much normal and as expected. Starts out a little bit slow, a little bit low on the TWR to start with, but it picks up quickly. A little while into the flight, I noticed a little bit of a problem, because when it gets to the point where the periapsis is supposed to be coming up to a good positive number and the thing is supposed to be getting into orbit, I noticed I get the apoapsis way high up, but not until after I pass or get really close to the periapsis, which means I have to fly the ship up and keep firing the engines to counter drag until finally I reach the point where I can, where I'm high enough in altitude that I can burn radial out and raise my periapsis up. I know it's a completely inefficient maneuver, but it does help. I also reach a problem where I forgot to set the second antenna, and I lost connection for a while. So I had to go ahead and orbit around until I restored connection on ComSat 1, set a connection on the polar ComSat, and then finally I can do that radial outburn to get the periapsis up out of the atmosphere and get myself in a position where I can finally start setting up the maneuver for the burn out to the moon. The maneuver finally set up and the flight computer programmed. I go ahead and do the burn. Everything's fine. The ship isn't doing any weird spinning or anything like that. And then towards the end of the burn, I disabled the flight computer and did the rest of it manually to make sure the periapsis was right in there where I wanted it, so to make the rendezvous with the station a little bit easier. Then just a little bit of time warp, get to the moon sphere of influence, and set up, and then get ready to execute the retrograde burn to get into orbit. Now, as the burn was executing, I decided that what I was going to do is let the thing get captured and let the orbit get shrunk down reasonably most of the way, and then disable the flight computer and do a little bit more burn manually, bringing the orbit in fairly close but not all the way to circular and not matching up quite, because the idea is to then do a little bit of maneuvering and see what I could do about arranging an encounter right on that first orbit. So I didn't have to mess around any more than necessary. I did end up getting a close encounter within 9 kilometers on the first orbit, and that will make rendezvousing with the station a lot easier right away. Now, I am going to go ahead and call this the episode right now, because while it's only a little over 20 minutes long, it has taken in excess of 4 hours of gameplay and speeding up video and so on to actually get this done. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. I'm out of here.